So guys, this stretch of 43 days could end up representing the most crucial point in time for VR gaming, as we all know the narrative. VR has no games is a very prevalent one, especially when looking at the PSVR 2's lack of first-party involvement, the heavily mod-dependent state of affairs in PCVR land at the moment, and of course the puzzling decision by Meta to release the Quest 3 with no exclusives and very few optimized titles at launch. But this stretch of 43 days does represent an opportunity for that narrative to shift, as there are 12 major releases in the VR world coming in that time span. And for the sake of the future of VR gaming, I believe that at least 7 of these games have to be absolute hits.
That's what Brett's saying. That's not reviewable.
With these two needing to be headset selling juggernauts. As we all know, there is a definite need to build up the VR gaming ecosystem with more high quality games. Welcome to the simulation inside the simulation. I am Tooodamngolden, your VR Voyager, and this is the first in a crucial series of reviews. 12 games, 43 days, one industry's fate hanging in the balance. So let's get to it with the first game up to the plate with Vampire the Masquerade Justice, courtesy of Fast Travel Games. So I'm gonna just keep it real with you guys. I had no idea until fairly recently that this title was a part of any type of franchise, let alone such a admittedly long-running franchise, as Vampire the Masquerade Justice takes place in the world of darkness, a surprisingly long-running franchise, guys, that began way back in 1991 as a tabletop game and has since spun off over a variety of books, trading cards, and 7 other video games, none of which I've actually played. But this, my friends, is the first foray for the series into the world of VR, and right off the back, let's point out 2 things that this game absolutely masters: a solid full-length, well-written narrative and a moody and eerie atmosphere that is truly representative of the world of darkness. Seriously guys, if this review were solely based on these 2 aspects, this would be a perfect 10 out of 10, but moving more into this title, Vampire the Masquerade Justice does see gamers assume the role of Justice, a vampire of Clan Banu Hakim who travels from New York to Venice after the murder of his or her sire. Yes, you do have your choice, being either a male or female protagonist, in an effort to recover a mysterious statuette that was stolen from the sire. Now, when I say assume the role, guys, I really do mean it, as you will be tasked with managing an always fluctuating hunger meter located on your left wrist, which is the primary means of casting your special abilities, and when high will prevent Justice from using these set abilities. And this in turn will lead to you seeking nourishment in the form of both mortal and rat blood. With highly close-up and personal means of collection, as gamers will have to grab their target and aim their mouths towards the neck of the poor unfortunate targets of Justice's feeding frenzies. Now, I must say that this version of Venice in the world of darkness that Fast Travel Games has designed is eerily beautiful, with a lot of attention to detail being paid with creating an omnipresent feeling of uneasiness, combined with beautiful light reflections, shadows, and downright sexy water effects to really make this version of Venice shine within the darkness. And as Justice, this adventure RPG will see gamers sleuthing and sneaking about in the shadows and from various vantage points to inch ever closer to the truth behind the aforementioned statuette, completing missions and side quests alike to earn XP for ability upgrades, such as allowing for rats to provide more nourishment, or the ability to open up the Intimidate dialogue tree, which adds a nice touch to an admittedly slightly scaled back RPG experience. While this is most definitely a stealth-focused title, players will have the option to use a variety of different abilities in addition to a crossbow, with various craftable arrows to dispatch enemies and wreak havoc on Venetian citizens to your heart's content. Which leads us to the combat in this game, which actually provides a nice balance of offensive and defensive capabilities, but to me the star of the show combat-wise are the vampiric abilities, as there was something that just felt so perfect about summoning a demon portal or absolutely draining the life force force out of enemies with one flick of the wrist, but I will say that the abilities were a bit clunky at times, even the heavily used blink teleportation ability that, unlike Justice's other abilities, doesn't raise his hunger levels. Now, this clunkiness isn't game breaking by any means, but there is just a tinge of frustration on my part, as I do feel that just perhaps a couple of extra months of refinement would have gone a long way towards polishing up the combat just a bit, and unfortunately this clunkiness isn't only present within the combat. As honestly, for a title that depends on teleportation as a primary mechanic within the game, I have got to believe that there could have been a more fluid way to achieve this goal, as having to hold the A button while aiming without a quick cast function like you see in a lot of MOBAs does make things a tad bit awkward sometimes, but again, this is by no means game breaking. In this roughly 6 to 8 hour campaign, you will inevitably find yourself sneaking around a surprisingly vertical arrangement of rooftops, sewer pipes, and building windows, as well as making your way through a large underground sewer system, all of which is presented with some surprisingly nice textures, although the PSVR 2 guys is the clear winner in the visuals department due to slightly higher quality, well, everything visually, but the Quest version itself isn't anything to scoff at either. With that being said, the character models in this game are a bit rough around the edges, guys, and it probably won't be garnering many votes for the best VR visuals anytime soon, but these primary characters do have enough personality, in my opinion, to overcome their at times ghoulish appearance. Now, while this game does allow for a moderate amount of exploration, I must mention that unlike past entries into this franchise, this is very much a linear experience, with different missions taking place within instances called undertakings, which essentially equate to levels, of which must be completed before returning to Pietro's hideout, or the inner sanctum, where the gamers will spend XP points to upgrade their abilities. But again, while linear in nature, this game is driven not only by some top-notch voice acting, but it also has one of the best narrative storylines that VR currently has to offer at the moment, as well as some absolutely amazing audio with a very cinematic vibe to the background music and a very well acted story, of course. But the only gripe I would say that I do have in this department is, of course, the repetitiveness of the voice lines vocalized by the NPCs, as essentially after about, I'd say 20 to 30 minutes of sleuthing around in this archaic water-soaked Venice, you will have essentially heard them all, which does, at least for me, take away from the immersion a bit. However, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum is the sharp, witty, and well thought out interactions between Justice and the story's main co-stars that do an excellent job of immersing the gamer into the core story, and kudos to Fast Travel Games for giving us a decent length campaign that doesn't really feel overly bloated just for the sake of adding more playtime onto this one, as from start to finish, guys, this story had me as a first-time Voyager into the franchise absolutely hooked. But now, time for the singular most important aspect of any review, and quite frankly, one that I don't think gets highlighted enough from reviews. How fun is this game? And in my opinion, Vampire: The Masquerade Justice is a very fun game, folks, with some really solid mechanics and even more solid ideas that unfortunately didn't always pan out as planned. Rough edges aside, guys, this beautiful atmosphere, audio presentation, narrative, and pacing do add up to make a pretty good experience, one that with a bit more polish, perhaps via future update, could easily drift into the great territory, making this game a respectable 7.3 out of 10 in my books. And this will be one of those games that adds some mid-level depth to the VR space after gamers are done with, you know, the bigger titles like Half-Life Alyx or Asgard's Wrath, and hopefully this serves as a start towards reversing the damaging narrative that... Thank you for watching.